Hi, welcome everyone. My name's Mike Rosenbaum. I'm the CEO of Catalyst DevWorks. We are the product development and digital transformation partner to Starwood and Starwood Vacation Ownership. And I'm not going to talk long because you're going to be much more interested in hearing from Ein Cole, who's a VP at Starwood Vacation Ownership. And I just wanted to thank Ein for being here because for those of you who may be following the press about Starwood and Starwood Vacation Ownership, it is an extremely busy week. And so thank you for taking time out to be here.
You know, this is about 1.5 miles from my office, so it was a huge inconvenience to get here. So thanks for having us. When we talked to the Catalyst team about doing this session, one of the things we wanted to do was just talk openly about the experience that we've had. And so I wanted to share with you a little bit of background about, I work in the vacation ownership side of Starwood, which, as Mike referenced, is actually in a process of doing a public company spinoff. But I've been with Starwood for a little over 18 years. I started out putting in HR systems and ended up in things that now get called digital, but 10 years ago we called them, web, mobile, other things. And as I think about our business, and we talked about this session, one of the things we wanted to do is really talk about how did we do some of the transformation we've done in the past few years. And I'm really proud of a few things that we've done, but they're not necessarily intuitive. You wouldn't get them on the surface. And part of that is we have a really good culture. We have a lot of people who work very well together. But just because you work well together doesn't mean you're necessarily organized for success. My boss has a great line that we like to use called silos of excellence. And what we mean by that is we have a number of operating units. And those operating units are all extremely, extremely efficient. Right? They're numbers driven, they're results driven, they're oriented, they're doing well. But that doesn't mean we're optimized across our business units. And so one of the things that we talk about is how do we follow our business from the customer lifecycle? How do we look and say, does our operating mode actually match that of what our customers would like to see? And the answer a lot of times is no. And so what we've recognized is that we need to do a much better job of orienting ourselves in that way. But in order to make that change, we had a lot of internal and external friction. And what does that friction look like? Well, often that friction is inertia. It's just people who are really good at doing what they've been doing, and we need to ask them to do it in a different way. And as we focused on customer engagement and seeing things through the eyes of the customer, about 5 years ago, we looked a lot at customer engagement. We created what we called the path to purchase. And the path to purchase allowed us to follow a customer through their entire life cycle. So we started looking at from the moment that we start marketing to them till they come on site to one of our properties. They take a tour, they learn about our product, perhaps they purchase, perhaps they don't, and they come back later. And one of the things we spent a long time looking at was the engagement on our website. So what I wanted to do is talk about an example of how we reduced some of the organizational friction which led to a better customer experience. So our website for a long period of time was really brochureware. You can see this site today at starwoodvacationnetwork.com. Until about 13, you would come to the website once, you would learn about the product, and you'd really actually have no reason to come back. It was a great brochure, it was developed by our creative team, and that was about it. We changed it about once a year. And we said, how do we build something that our customers are gonna wanna come back to, and we can continuously engage not only new customers, but our existing owners? And so what we did is we looked and said, all right, once a year is clearly not enough. How are we going to enable ourselves to update this on a more real-time basis? The site was fundamentally developed by our creative team. We had a great relationship with them, but they didn't build transactional things, and we, IT, didn't build things that looked good. So we said, how do we work better together to get that done? So I had a crazy idea one day. I took my highest potential person on my team, and I asked her to actually go report to the leader of our creative team. She picked up her stuff and she moved downstairs, and everyone thought I was crazy for giving away one of my best people. But that built a trust that couldn't really be built any other way. I now had someone embedded right in the creative team that could speak the language, that could be a hybrid and work in between them. And that let our creative team see that we were actually invested in that success. We later cohabitated. We moved many more of the IT team that work in these areas to sit right by creative. So now they're eating together, working together, joking together, and that went a really, really long way. We also recognized that we needed more arms and legs. So as we were staffing up, we said, okay, how are we operating today? Which was fundamentally long-term waterfall. I told you the site was really being updated about once a year. That's about the slowest waterfall you can get. And we said, how do we have more visible progress? How do we make it so that when someone comes back to the site each time, they see something new? Because we get behaviorally programmed, right? If there's always something new to see, there's a reason to come back. And so we said, how do we have that visible progress? We had tried the Agile methodology in about 2006. It never really stuck. And we said, hey, we think this is actually a really good time to try Agile again. And so what we did, we actually talked to the rest of Starwood and we said, hey, who's doing Agile well? Some of our folks in another division of Starwood said, you know, we're using this company, Catalyst, who's Mike's here today. And, you know, we brought them in to teach us Agile and it's working well. We thought, hey, let's give that a shot. So about the same time we were combining these teams, we also taught these teams a new way of working. We went through an Agile boot camp, but we were concerned that it wouldn't stick because the last time we'd done it, it didn't stick. So what we did is we had Catalyst come in and actually provide resources that helped us through the Agile process until we built up muscle memory, right? Now, when we talk about a daily stand-up, or when we talk about a backlog or backlog refinement, we know what that means. Hope everything's okay. And so now we actually have the method and the process ingrained, and we can do it over and over again. So we've moved from a 1-year development cycle to a 2-week development cycle. And let me tell you, when we talk about trust, I can get just about any business leader to trust me for 2 weeks. Right? If we talk about it and something's going to take 6 months, we've got to talk about it at the beginning. We've got to agree on a plan. And then once a month, I've got to update them and I've got to keep updating them. And along the way, I change my mind and they change their mind. And 6 months later, who knows if we actually still have agreement. But if we do things in 2-week cycles, we can say, hey, look, this is the piece we're going to deliver in 2 weeks. Just trust us a little bit. Let us run with it and let's see how it goes. And it's amazing how many people will say, yeah, if you can do something in 2 weeks, I'm good with that. And so now we've got this 2-week development cycle. I had a great experience, I don't know, probably 6 months after we started Agile, where I had one of our business leaders came to me and she said, hey, your team is actually going too fast. Could you guys slow down? Now, I don't know how many of you are in IT roles, you really don't hear that, right? So we took that as a good sign. One of the other things that we did was we really published our success quite a lot, both to customers and to others to make sure they knew there was something new. If you go to this site, you'll see a number of things. I'm not going to take you through it, but you'll see user-generated content, right? So basically, every time someone comes to the site, they see new photos, they see new things. And when it becomes your standard way of operating that the site should always have fresh and new content, that's really transformative.
Thanks. So just to reinforce a number of Ian's points in here, so just so you have a sense of sort of who we are and where we come from, we do product development and digital transformation mostly for large enterprises and sort of organizations going through a massive disruption. So you think about organizations like Starwood, organizations like another client of ours, Choice Hotels, that that are facing major changes in the industries in which they operate. It puts a lot of pressure on the way in which the technology organization has a relationship with business leadership. And so obviously the topic of this conference is all about sort of how do you think about that digital transformation, how do you assemble the organization to make that work. I would say the common theme that we see across our client base is that this concept of speed, the concept of sort of developing a closer relationship is key. So the question is, how do you start with it? And one of the sort of pieces of information that you can hear from from the way in which Ayn is talking about their story is that the ability to accelerate the relationship between the technology organization and the business helps develop a foundation of trust that lets you do a lot of other things. So the way that we're built is we apply data and predictive analytics to assembling software engineering teams. And what that lets us do is it lets us deploy software engineering teams within 24 hours. Our clients tend to use that to accelerate their response to a business leader, which in turn builds the foundation that allows these other conversations, like how do you cohabitate? How do you get the business leader to see the technology leader as a true partner in the business strategy? But that starts with the technology leader messaging to the business leader how significantly they understand the time pressures and how to deliver on that. And so I wanted to share a little bit of data that actually comes from sort of broader Starwood that sort of relates to using this kind of model that relates to speed, but also relates to the idea of thinking about, who is the right engineer in the right seat or the right person in the right seat at the right time in order to make that digital transformation possible. And so this idea of rethinking how we assemble these teams and rethinking how these organizations are assembled, has significant impacts on the way in which these other pieces work. So just so you sort of know what this is data that was released by Starwood a year ago, that related to sort of different models of engagement that were specifically related to digital transformation. The chart on the left is commit to deliver. So technology organization is making a commitment each 2 weeks as to what's going to get done, and how does that compare to what actually gets done and accepted by the business. So these are percentages inside of Starwood as to what those ratios look like at a little bit larger scale. As you can see, using this other model, which allows sort of rapid response and allows sort of thinking about who's sitting in which seat in a different way, generate sort of meaningfully higher percentage of commit to deliver. So in other words, if you commit 100 points, on average, Catalyst is delivering 90 points in this context. Accenture is under 80. Time to steady state relates to the speed with which a new team gets up to full speed. So you put a new team on something, how long before they figure out what's going on, how long before they're sort of delivering at a steady state level, and we define that as sort of variation, sort of acceleration of 10% or less, after you're at that steady state. And so sort of typical time to get to that steady state being 3 sprints, so 6 weeks, compared to tier 1 global services providers at 12 weeks, or sort of other options at 10 weeks. And so that's a meaningful difference. And then consistency of velocity is basically how good are you at predicting what you're going to deliver. So, so how much does sort of the delivery change from 2-week increment to 2-week increment, which again becomes very important in building the foundation of that relationship between the technology leader and the business leader that again enables all these other conversations. So, with that. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. Oh. The first one and the third one are very related, except that, so the first one being commitment to deliver, no. So velocity is just an absolute number. So you think about how much are you delivering in a 2-week increment, and how much does that fluctuate from 2-week to 2-week period. So in other words, how good are you at consistently pointing sort of the work in a sprint, and how consistent are you from each 2-week increment to 2-week increment at delivering that? And so this is essentially a variance, so. That's exactly right. Right, so that's exactly right. Oh, I didn't repeat the question, did I? So, so the question was, now that you've heard the answer, aren't the first chart and the third chart related? And sort of corollary to that, isn't it true that you could be great at the third and terrible at the first? And it's actually, that's why we measure these 3 in different ways, so that you can sort of see each of these levers, again, as part of building that foundation of trust.
So, we don't consider ourselves experts at this at Starwood, right? I mean, we focus a lot on the customer experience, but we're not a world-class development shop building things for other people. But what I'd like to do is share some of the keys to success. Why do we think this is successful? Well, first of all, we've doubled our web sessions on the site 2 years, year over year, and we're on track to do that for a third year. So the things that we're doing with the customers are working. Second, we have been in the middle of a spinoff of our division for over a year, which caused us to do little projects like update every web page we'd ever built, update every email we'd ever built, and then when the rules change, go back and do that again and again and again. What I think is we would not have been prepared for the spinoff work had we not done the focus on Agile and the focus on being able to move the team and pivot the team on a very frequent basis. But some of the keys that I found in applying these methods, pick a project and make sure it's one that is meaningful enough that if you have a win, it will build trust, right? Do it with a partner that doesn't have the most challenges, right? Do it in an area that is meaningful enough, but lets you get that quick win and demonstrate some consistency, and hopefully with a partner that will publicize the success with you. Rethink the organizational structure. Us building this hybrid team with creative was very unconventional in our world, and there are people who still get confused by it. One of the things I like to say is don't let your cost centers dictate your organizational structure, right? Sometimes your historic way that your accounting systems were built and set up a very long time ago dictates how you work. Find the way to work and then figure out how to map that back onto your cost structures. Build coalitions, not empires, right? If you've got good people, but they would be best served sitting in another part of the organization, helping that organization implement a great customer experience. I've done that a number of times, and it really does work because what you're doing is putting someone in that seat next to that other leader every single day that can be a positive influence on them and can build the bridges between the teams. Lead by example, I think that's a very straightforward one. When we say we're going to deliver every 2 weeks, we deliver every 2 weeks, and there's got to be a very good reason to not do so. At the same time, we need to be very accountable. If we miss something, we need to call it a miss and not just say, oh, we'll get that 2 weeks from now, right? There's a really easy opportunity when you get Agile to sort of just kick the can down the road if you don't get to that item. You still need to be accountable for those misses. And I think that was the measurement that came out of our Starwood's PMO on looking at that exactly. We've already talked about Agile. I think partners make a big point of it. That's why I'm here agreeing to chat with Catalyst. Hey, I can tell you a couple weeks ago, probably 3-4 weeks ago, I called the Catalyst team and I said, you're always telling me you can have somebody here in 24 hours. Here's the challenge I have, go. And I got a call back and said, hey, we've got the guy that you're looking for, and we had them on site soon, and it's been a very big benefit. So, find a partner you can work with that isn't just playing by their rules. And then, don't forget to celebrate success. One of the things we started doing is we send a very large leadership email every single time we do a release of the website. And it's actually gotten people trained that we are constantly delivering. Even if they don't read the email, even if they don't really process what changed, they know that it's always changing, and that sets a mindset, and that builds trust so that when they do want some other project, you can have a conversation about, hey, these are the methods we're using in this area that's allowing us to deliver very well. We'd like to employ these same methods over here. Here's how we think they would work, and here's how they would transfer. That's credibility. So, and then obviously rinse and repeat. Once you have a success in one area or in one place, it doesn't mean you're going to stay successful. We built these Agile teams, and then one of the things that we'll go do is we'll say, all right, that team's been on that track for a long enough period of time. We actually need to shut that work down and get them to now go look in another area, because they just keep wanting to iterate and develop in that same place. So you've got to look at other parts of your business and say, how do I take these same methods that are working and use them somewhere else? So that's a little peek into our story. Yes?
So do you have any internal friction? You talk about friction in the customer and business.
So the question was, did we have other internal friction within other IT groups or others? Yes, there are. I'm a big believer in sharing rationale. I tend to get very passionate about the things I believe in, and I tend to talk really loud about them. And so what I will do is if we're trying to really change things, I'll go talk to a lot of people. Hey, here's what I'm doing. Here's why we're doing it. Here's the goal we have. Welcome. And so I would go to our security. So I'm very blessed that I've got a great partner who runs IT ops and IT security. And I go to him and I'm like, all right, I want to go do this over here. Can you keep me safe? Right? Tell me your first reaction. Tell me what you think won't work. Other groups had, some of our business partners had a lot of challenge with the idea that we were not delivering an entire product, that we would deliver a piece of something, and sort of before we went down this process with the website, probably the reason we had the organizational clout to be able to change things the way we did is we did another project that we failed at multiple times trying to do it in big bang waterfall fashion. And we sort of did a skunk works proof of concept that just met the base need. And then when we said, we can meet the base need, would you like us to make that available to customers? Somehow we got comfortable with that and we kept building on it over time. So we kind of tripped into Agile in that way. But no, there's definitely been friction. There's also those people who want consistency, that think that every project should be run exactly the same way. I'm not a believer in that, because I think the way you run, predominantly web content management projects looks very different than implementing a mortgage system or a finance package. So you've got to pick the method that's right for the specific job. So, other questions? So the question was, do both Waterfall and Agile exist, and how do we choose between one or the other? The answer is yes. Predominantly, as I was mentioning a second ago, it comes back to the type of work. Some work really needs to be developed and delivered in very large packages. If we're doing a major overhaul to a system, then it tends to look more waterfall. We can, and the other way that we choose is we tend to have different teams, and that team has built up that maturity in their process. So hey, if a new CIO came in, I would expect that they would look and they'd say, why do you have that team doing this and that team doing that? You should be consistent. My answer would be, that team's successful right now, and they're working in that way with their business leaders. Everyone's comfortable. They're getting the job done. We have a low failure rate. Can we keep moving? But you're right. We do have to assess every so often and say, is that the right way to get that work done? But it really comes down to both the team that is executing and the maturity of their process, and second, the type of work it is and really the risk on it. The web digital work that we do most days is fairly de-risked, right? It's not a huge deal if the way that we show someone's photos online is a little off. If someone's mortgage balance is off, we have a much larger problem. So he's back. So the question is Agile an excuse to do whatever we want, whenever we want? I'd be a real hypocrite if I were to say yes, but there is a little bit of that. So the question is about Agile and discipline. I think the larger issue that we've seen is that we put a team on a topic, and I have to help them understand that even a 2-week increment of work has a real dollar cost. And so most of the days, I don't have the development teams thinking about what their work costs. But when they come back and they say, you asked us to do this, but we really want to go this way, or we see this generally, we want to redesign something, then I will say, all right, I need to understand the cost of it. And you can't always just talk in sprints. But one of the things we do is we tell the team, pretty much consider a fully loaded sprint, 2 weeks, costs, X, I'm gonna make up a number, $40,000. So please be aware, if you come back to us and you say you want to divert the team for 2 weeks to do that topic, I need to see more than $40,000 worth of value. I actually need to see a multiple of $40,000. And that's a bit of an education. Not every developer is ready to have that conversation, but some of the leads, especially when they decide that, tech A is better than tech B and they want to swap something for the sake of swapping it, you have to kind of put a box around those. Or I'll say, great, take 2 weeks worth of rope, but you need to do something within that sprint. Or maybe you dedicate one person to it within that sprint, and let's see where it goes. And there's also the concept of a spike where someone goes off and does more of a research project. So it hasn't been a challenge to date, but it's a matter of setting some guide rails for the team.
Add one thing to that. One of the things that we find sort of across our client base is that it becomes really important to focus on transparency in Agile. And so the reason why we have that data, and so, Starwood isn't the only clients. We have a Fortune 500 sports apparel company based in Beaverton, Oregon, who released similar data. A big health insurance company that released similar data, is because they collect the data so that they can see what the Agile teams are doing, so that it becomes not quite so much, what does sort of everyone want to do and sort of do whatever you want to do, is that holding accountability to that data, holding accountability to productivity, to acceptance rates, to sort of consistency it's just sort of a different way of thinking about accountability. And that tends to help put a frame on Agile rather than this sort of Wild West kind of idea. Sorry.
Yeah, and I'm much more willing to give the team 2 weeks worth of rope than 6 months or a year worth, right? So even if we had a sprint that turned out to be a total failure, the cost is far less than the cost of a failed project before. So, by the way, I'm also not saying Agile is the only way. I'm saying find the method that works for you and your team, and find the method that works with your business partners as well. And it just so happens that the leader of our creative team and I have partnered on this, and we get it. And they actually run some of their print work now in what looks like an agile software development method, which is kind of funny given how the conversations first started. There's actually some good books on agile for mixed creative and IT teams that we took a lot from. So, and then obviously Catalyst helped us learn quite a bit. So there's a sign being held up. Does that mean we wrap? All right. Hey, thank you all. We'll be here for a bit if you have any other questions. Appreciate you attending.